Okay, children, today we're going to talk about another character who has done even more damage for the animated representations of elementary school teachers than a guy with ears on his neck screaming about how fairies rule the earth. He appears in one of the greatest TV shows ever made, and he wears 2 different shades of green. Can you guess who it is yet? No? Well, maybe you need to go to hell. You go to hell and you die! Out of all the outrageous things that have been said and done on the revolutionary television series South Park, the life of Mr. Hebert Garrison has to be amongst the top, as he is surely one of the most complex and mentally unstable characters of all time.
Remember, there are no stupid questions, just stupid people.
The schoolteacher is much different from the average male resident of the little Colorado-based mountain town, as rather than just being a simpleton, he is a borderline psychopath. Well, not so much borderline as teetering over the edge.
Did you ask Mr. Hat?
Mr. Hat, may I please be excused from class?
Well, Kyle.
No! You hear me? You go to hell! You go to hell and you die!
Guess you'll have to take your seat, Kyle.
Garrison is the teacher of the show's lead characters Stan, Kyle, Cartman and Kenny, and after season 5, Butters. In addition to being an awful teacher, he is potentially schizophrenic, racist, sexist, and homophobic, despite also being blatantly gay.
What the hell are you talking about? I am not gay.
Well, you sure do act like it.
I just act that way to get chicks, dumbass.
In the early years of the now 20-seasoned show, he had a hand puppet called Mr. Hat, which Garrison talked to and even more weirdly responded to as if it were real. After finally coming out of the closet by the end of season 4, the character suddenly had a sex change operation in the first episode of season 9, becoming Mrs. Garrison, but a few years later reverted back to a much tamer, until the most recent seasons, Mr. Garrison.
I'm sorry, Wendy, but I just don't trust anything that bleeds for 5 days and doesn't die.
As a teacher, Garrison's lesson plan is more of a spray of irrelevant trivia and wildly inaccurate claims, which is the first thing established about him in the first episode of South Park, broadcast in 1997.
Christopher Columbus discovered America. He helped the Indians win their war against Frederick Douglass.
Other examples of his lesson plan involve teaching the children that British singer Engelbert Humperdinck was the first man on the moon, teaching them about sitcoms such as The Love Boat and The Facts of Life, deconstructing the Cinderella song Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo through math, and talks about Game of Thrones and Les Miserables as a form of history lesson.
You're the retarded offspring of 5 monkeys having butt sex with a fish squirrel. Congratulations.
Garrison likely teaches such pointless ramblings because he thinks it is vital information the children need to know, though it could also be he just doesn't give a shit as long as they don't answer him back, or shit on his desk. Ironically, quite possibly the most famous scene from South Park, which occurs in its movie, involves Garrison involved in traditional education by testing the 8-year-olds on the 5 times table.
Okay, now let's try to get an answer from someone who's not a complete retard.
South Park's co-creator and co-writer Trey Parker voices Mr. Garrison, and has said he was inspired by a kindergarten teacher who used a puppet to communicate with young children, and a professor he had whilst at university, who Parker is mimicking the voice of. Although it is unlikely either of those teachers were as inappropriate as Mr. Garrison, it's a safe bet that Parker found at least one of them to be crazy, nay creepy.
Genetic engineering lets us correct God's horrible, horrible mistakes, like German people.
Mr. Hat was Garrison's permanent right-hand man for the first few years of the show, even in scenes that took place outside of the classroom and nowhere near the school. It was sometimes used as a way for Garrison to make inappropriate remarks or threats, but always referred to by him as if it were more than a dapper sock puppet. Halfway through season 2 of the series, Mr. Hat went missing, and unable to cope without someone to talk to, Garrison replaced him with Mr. Twig, who existed for 6 episodes, until Mr. Hat came back. Incidentally, Mr. Twig had an upside-down pink triangle on his little t-shirt, which the Nazi Party had forced homosexuals to wear. This was due to the increasing speculations and evidence that Mr. Garrison was gay.
What the?
Mr. Hat! Mr. Hat saved us, Chef!
This provides the confirmation most fans need that Mr. Hat was in fact a possessed puppet. Then again, this coming from a show where aliens, Santa, a talking turd, and Jesus are proved to be real, yet a living piece of fabric seems to still have the biggest question mark over it. That and the Mitch Connor episode. Mr. Hat continued to appear alongside Mr. Garrison for 4.5 more seasons, until he was replaced by a human classroom assistant, Mr. Slave. Garrison stated that this was because the kids were now too old to be expected to take Mr. Hat seriously, but behind the scenes, Trey Parker and Matt Stone felt this was a way to signal a change in style that the series had begun edging towards. Indeed, the show became less of a surreal sitcom format and targeted current events. This meant the boys began being seen in the classroom almost as frequently as Homer Simpson now goes to work. Which sadly means Mr. Garrison would now be appearing less than he had previous, although he definitely did not become as obsolete as Chef between seasons 5 and 9.
Could we get rid of all the Mexicans?
No, Mr. Garrison.
Rats!
Garrison has always been rather outrageous in his attitudes towards minorities. In the 4th episode of the show, he told Stan,
Gay people are evil. Evil right down to their cold black hearts, which pump not blood like yours and mine, but rather a thick, vomitous oil.
And as for Garrison's private life, there have been many disturbing revelations, such as, off-screen, he had sex with Cartman's pot-bellied pig, and once the boys caught him scuba diving in a sewer. No explanation given.
Mr. Garrison, you're a Klan member?
No, but Mr. Hat is. White power, white power!
He was fired from teaching in season 4 after the police caught him trying to solicit sex from a child. And then there's the infamous relationship between Garrison and his father, which I'll elaborate upon later. Despite showing moderate stereotypical signs of being a homosexual, Garrison always denied it, to the point where he began to insist how much he craved poontang. But eventually, after going completely insane, Garrison admitted to himself and the town that he was gay, and returned to teaching. But in the premiere of the 9th season, Mr. Garrison decides he identifies more with women than men, and has a sex change operation, becoming Janet Garrison. The character's further progression into the madness of an identity crisis was when she decided she was a lesbian, only to have a mouse's penis attached to his genitals in season 12, meaning the return of Hebert Garrison. Since then, the character became less eccentric and was barely seen doing anything of significance, until season 19, where he unleashed 7 years' worth of pent-up aggression, and decided to run for president, mostly to carry out his ruthless views on immigration. Gee, I wonder which boisterous politician South Park's creators were giving the finger to.
Uh-oh, retard alert!
Now, as I've mentioned, for the first 4 years of the show, Mr. Garrison appeared in practically every episode. However, there are only a few times per season when he was actually central to the plot. In Weight Gain 4000, Garrison is startled by the news that Kathy Lee Gifford will be coming to town, as back when he was a kid robot, she upstaged him and won the talent contest. Mr. Hat eventually persuades Mr. Garrison to at last avenge himself by killing Kathy Lee. South Park would become known for taking no prisoners when it came to ridiculing and flat-out insulting celebrities, and Garrison was actually the forerunner for this. After the murder attempt fails, Mr. Garrison is sent to a psychiatric hospital, although it is Mr. Hat who is apparently getting the treatment.
Well, I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling kids.
In Tom's rhinoplasty, Garrison has decided to get a nose job, which completely changes his face to that of David Hasselhoff. With a whole new feel of self-confidence and the fact women are now attracted to him, he quits teaching to become a model.
Just a few hundred more shots and we'll be done. Oh boy, I'm gonna need some more smack.
But having fangirls starts to wear and tear him out, and so Garrison proclaims he wants things back to the way they were, so off-screen has the surgery reversed and goes back to the school. In Cartman's Mom is a Dirty Slut Part 1 and 2, Mr. Garrison is one of several characters accused of being Eric Cartman's biological father. After local mad scientist Mephisto is shot, the makers of America's Most Wanted make a biopic of the incident, which Garrison attempts to audition for, but apparently isn't convincing enough at being himself. During filming, the crew, cast and townfolk become trapped by the raging blizzard, and even though barely any time has passed, Jimbo insists they resort to cannibalism.
How will we live with ourselves now?
One day at a time, Mayor. Well, I'm bringing home some Eric Roberts in a doggy bag. Does anybody else want some?
Summer Sucks is the episode where Mr. Hat disappears, and begins with Garrison accusing his class of being the culprits. Struggling to maintain his already dishevelled sanity, Mr. Garrison visits Dr. Katz from the cartoon sitcom Dr. Katz, who offers a fairly rational theory.
You're in denial, so you act out your gay persona with a homosexual puppet.
But Garrison decides a much more sane idea is for him to just create a new hand puppet sidekick. In Chef Aid, someone is gradually destroying Mr. Twig.
I need some help over here. Please help. It's a stick. Damn it, don't give me that medical jargon.
It turns out to be Mr. Hat, or rather Garrison finds Mr. Hat in his closet and rants to the puppet that he's glad he left.
You are a lying ball of turd, Mr. Hat! I hope you starve, you lousy son of a bitch!
A slightly more dignified public meltdown than the creator of Coney 2012. Remember when that was a thing?
It's over, Mr. Garrison. This is it. We've had enough.
Freed from jail by the Mad Hatter, Twig, who has a French accent, tells Garrison that he understands that the balding bastard is in love with Mr. Hat, and will respect him if he chooses from the heart. And I guess it's a good thing Officer Barbrady is the most retarded cop in TV history, otherwise he might have questioned why Mr. Garrison escaped from his jail cell, and maybe put him back in it. In Gnomes, Garrison has been informed that he might be fired, as none of the kids in his class seem to be learning anything. So he divides them into two groups and tells them to write an essay on a current event. Our main boys work with Tweak, whose dad gladly writes the essay for them, and even though Mr. Garrison isn't fooled, the committee board are.
If these people find out you didn't really write that paper, and I actually do get fired, then Mr. Hat is going to do horrible things to you. Oh, not that, Mr. Hat.
They try to go along with the lie for as long as they can, but eventually confess.
You little turd! You ruined my life for the last time!
And Mr. Garrison was neither fired nor got any Mr. Hat-fueled revenge on the boys. Honestly, I expected better continuity from a show where one of the lead characters dies horrifically at the end of each episode, only to be brought back to life by the next one, with no acknowledgement of it ever happening. The South Park movie came about because Stone and Parker assumed the show was going to be cancelled after a year or two, and so wanted to go out with a bang. Although Mr. Garrison appears throughout the film, the only time he serves the plot is when he is awaiting the order to execute crude Canadians Terrence and Phillip. However, he is the butt of the joke which arguably put South Park on the map, by bringing to cheaply animated life every child and teenager's dream of telling their teacher to fuck off.
How would you like to suck my balls?
What did you say?
I'm sorry, actually, what I said was... How would you like to suck my balls, Mr. Garrison?
Take Mr. Hat. Please, get him out of here.
As he is returning to hell, Satan spots the hand puppet, and takes it with him as a way of coping with his loneliness. But then it's back on Garrison's hand during the final song. Great continuity! Bigger, Longer and Uncut was released in the middle of the TV show's third season, and that Christmas Mr. Garrison had his own little musical sketch during Mr. Hankey's Christmas Classics, which can be heard on the album of the same name.
Hey,
Hey there, Mr. Muslim. Merry fucking Christmas. Put down that book, the Koran, and here's some holiday wishes. In case you haven't noticed, it's Jesus' birthday. So let's all rejoice for Jesus. Merry fucking Christmas to you.
In Worldwide Recorder Concert, Garrison is horrified that he and the class will be going to his hometown of Arkansas.
My parents lived there. My father still lives there. He molested you when you were a boy?
Mr. Garrison is advised to confront his father about the issue, where we learn the inevitably sick and twisted version of the children's teacher's problem with parental sex abuse is the fact that his father never abused him.
I wasn't good enough for you, was that it, Dad? Sure, you could go off and screw any whore on Ryland Street, but when it came to your own son, you were just too busy!
Poor Mr. Garrison Sr. doesn't get any assistance from his wife or Mr. Mackey on the subject, as Mrs. Garrison, no Herbert's mother, acts shocked when she learns her husband never molested their son, and the only advice the counsellor can offer is that Mr. Garrison Sr. helps his son by having sex with him. After a night of vigorous butt-pounding, Mr. Garrison feels gayer than ever, but once he leaves, his father reveals that he hired musician Kenny G to fuck his son. Gross. Unless, like Mr. Garrison, you find the thought of having sex with your 60-year-old dad appealing, in which case, you are really gross. In Cherokee hair tampons, Garrison is suspended due to the events of the previous episode, where he was arrested for being a pedo, and because it has been brought to his boss's attention that he is a seriously unqualified teacher. Unsure what to do with himself, he starts to write a romance novel, but once completed, the publisher finds the lengthy descriptions about the character's penis to be a tad off-putting.
What the hell are you talking about?
This is what we in the book publishing business like to call gay.
In 4th grade, the boys' new teacher, Miss Chokesondick, is finding it difficult to control the rowdy students, and wants to ask their previous teacher for help. But the staff explain that after Mr. Garrison's romance novel won a gay Pulitzer Prize, he went berserk, ran off into the mountains, and hasn't been seen since. Miss Chokesondick finds Garrison, who advises her that the way to stand up to disobedience is to be really inappropriate. Mr. Garrison is then visited by his own spirit, who orders him to finally admit he is a homosexual.
I'm gay!
In Trapper Keeper, Garrison is now working as the school's kindergarten teacher, and tries to organise a class president. But the election becomes overly complicated due to the narrow majority vote, and along with Ike clearly being unsuited for the job but somehow the victor, the subplot becomes a parody of the controversial presidential election between Al Gore and George W. Bush.
Oh, for Christ's sake, you're all acting like a bunch of kids!
In The Entity, Mr. Garrison has had enough of the increased yet incompetent airport security after the September 11th terrorist attack, and so vows to create a whole new mode of transportation.
What the hell was that?
Even though the monowheel requires drivers to have a dildo-esque device jammed up their anus, it becomes really popular, because...
It beats dealing with the airline companies, that's for sure.
But Garrison's success is brought to an abrupt end when the government has his business shut down.
Ah! Airline motherfuckers! You pieces of shit!
In the death camp of tolerance, Mr. Garrison is promoted to a 4th grade teacher, much to the anguish of Stan, Kyle, Cartman and Kenny, but he discovers that if the principal fired him for being gay, he could win a lawsuit of millions of dollars. So he replaces Mr. Hat with Mr. Slave, a sadomasochist who says little else but,
Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ.
After Garrison performs a couple of disturbing acts with his BDSM buddy, the children try to complain to their parents, but are punished for not being accepting of homosexuality.
I stuck a gerbil up your ass and they want to give me a goddamn medal!
When his attempts to cause outrage at the awards ceremony also prove unsuccessful, an enraged Mr. Garrison points out the difference between tolerance and blind stupidity. As punishment for abusing the system, Garrison is not fired, preventing him from suing, and is instead sent to a concentration camp. In South Park is Gay, all the boys and men in town have been influenced by the reality show Queer Eye for the Straight Guy into acting and dressing very effeminate. As a homosexual, Mr. Garrison is offended by this, and he, Mr. Slave, and Kyle plot to kill the show's stars.
Well, crap, that didn't work.
After they refuse Garrison's pleas to stop the show and save gay culture, the teacher realizes that the group aren't actually gay. Instead, they are crab people. Trey Parker and Matt Stone have grown to hate this episode due to the absurd third act twist it has. And since then, whenever a bad idea is suggested in the writer's room, it tends to be referred to as another crab people. Anyway, our heroes are saved by the wives and mothers of South Park, who bludgeon the crab people to death for ruining their husbands' and sons' personalities. In Mr. Garrison's fancy new vagina, Garrison has seemingly made the abrupt decision that he is a woman trapped in a man's body, and so undergoes a sex change operation. Before the B-plot of this episode was thought of, the surgery scene originally lasted 5 minutes, cutting between the animated and real-life footage of a penis being sliced and turned inside out. Janet Garrison returns home to find a very disappointed Mr. Slave, as not only does he obviously not find women appealing, but Janet had the operation without consulting him, and so the two break up. Realizing she hasn't had a period yet, and therefore
I'm pregnant, everybody!
Garrison hurries to the abortion clinic, where the doctor informs her she does not have ovaries. Janet wants the surgery reversed, but the doctor had inserted her testicles into Kyle's kneecaps when he gave him a negroplasty. The episode ends with Garrison accepting his new gender.
Who wants to pound my vag? Girl power!
In Follow That Egg, Miss Garrison is still in love with Mr. Slave, and is devastated when she finds he and Big Gay Al are planning to marry. Janet tries to convince the governor not to allow same-sex marriage, but he points out there is no conclusive proof that same-sex marriages have negative effects on the children they adopt. Miss Garrison therefore tests her class to see if 2 boys can look after an egg as well as a boy and girl can. When the experiment doesn't seem to be failing, Janet hires an assassin to kill the egg. This fails, and the governor grants homosexuals the right to get married.
Love lost long ago. It was special then. It's over now.
In the 2-part episode Go God Go, Miss Garrison objects to having to teach evolution, as she doesn't believe in it, and so famous atheist Richard Dawkins is asked to help her. The two fall in love with each other, until one night in bed when Cartman, who is calling from the year 2546, informs Dawkins that Janet used to be a man. Disgusted, Dawkins flees, taking Garrison's newfound belief in science with him. Trey Parker has explained that this episode was his backlash to so many people assuming he is an atheist, which he is not. Richard Dawkins was quite unflattered by his portrayal in the episode, although he did enjoy the satirical parts that didn't involve him having sex with a bald transvestite. In D Yikes, Janet is mistaken for a lesbian by a new female friend, and is quickly convinced into becoming one after sampling some scissoring.
Scissor me timbers!
But the town's lesbian bar is sold to a group of Persians, which means the second half of the episode becomes a, at the time, fresh parody of Zack Schneider's 300. In Eek a Penis, Garrison is once again out of control in the classroom, and so is once again suspended. The reason this time is that she wants to have the operation to become a man again. As scientists are growing human body parts on the backs of mice, Miss Garrison pays them to grow a penis for her. But once grown, the mouse escapes, and Garrison chases it all over town, until the animal actually surrenders itself to the weeping transsexual.
Yeah! I'm back!
Between seasons 13 and 19, Mr. Garrison had no unique gimmick. No hand puppet, no wannabe gimp sidekick, and no outrageous behaviour. What he does have, though, is a belt. And his personality is more bored than angered by stuff. To me, this is highlighted in the series' current opening credit sequence, where Garrison looks out of the classroom window in bemusement as the entire main recurring and one-off characters gather around the school. In the two-part 200th episode, Mr. Hat made an appearance for the first time in 8 years, as Cartman's split personality Mitch Connor orders Garrison to finally tell him the truth about his father's identity. In the 2014 South Park game The Stick of Truth, Mr. Garrison's big role in the game was sweeping the community centre floor, because apparently that's all he's good for these days. Mr. Hat is also seen in the game during the level where you are inside Mr. Slave's anus. As with Season 18, Season 19 had a continuing storyline and theme to it.
Where has my country gone? Where has my country gone? It was a land of opportunity that we held dear, but now all these other assholes are coming here.
In Where Has My Country Gone, Garrison is pissed off that since the outbreak of political correctness, more and more Canadians have been allowed to immigrate to America. He and his beliefs start getting a following, and when informed Canada have built a wall to keep them out, he breaks into their country and discovers the reason they all left was due to their new Prime Minister, Donald Trump, who is never actually referred to by name.
Please, I can't. No, please, no! And I'm gonna keep this going all the way to Washington!
And so Mr. Garrison decides to run for the meagre position of president, and heads off to Washington along with his running mate Caitlyn Jenner. He later appears in the final 3 episodes of the season, where Principal Victoria asks him to come back and help her save their town, which has been taken over by PC, upmarket supermarkets, wine bars, and worst of all, ads.
If they want to mess with my town, I'll f*** every last one of them.
The season ends with things not entirely back to normal. And sure enough, Season 20 begins with our heroes trying to cope in a PC world, and Garrison now being an extremely unsubtle parody of Donald Trump.
Suck that hole, you dumb bitch! Up 10%, can you believe that shit?
The first episode, Member Berries, brings back a reference from an episode of the 8th season, as Garrison and his rival Hillary Clinton's thunderous thighs have been nicknamed the Giant Douche and the Turd Sandwich. Douche suddenly realizes that if he does win the election, he will be unable to fulfill the extremist policies he vowed to make, and so to try and save face, he tries to make himself seem more full of shit than the Turd Sandwich.
My opponent is a liar and cannot be trusted.
Oh, why the did it have to be her?
Looks like he's been disarmed.
Throughout the next few episodes, Garrison's attempts to throw in the towel just result in acquiring more praise for his honesty.
If you vote me in as president, I'll seriously throw up and have lost all faith in humanity.
In Douche and Danish, with only a few weeks left till the vote, Garrison starts making fun of women. This of course tied into the fact that a few weeks before the election, Trump's past sexist comments regarding women popped up in the headlines. This results in Mr. Garrison being chased by an angry mob of disenchanted voters, who, based on his comments, are surprisingly mostly men for some reason.
Mr. Garrison, you can't just act like nothing happened.
I don't know what you're talking about. I am a teacher. Okay, adjectives describe nouns.
He's gone so bonkers he's actually teaching proper education. He takes shelter at a meeting for memberberry addicts, led by Randy Marsh. And just what are memberberries?
Remember when marriage was just between a man and a woman? I remember. Oh, I remember.
Yeah, I remember that. Wait.
Anyway, it turns out J.J. Abrams is responsible for all that is currently wrong.
Of course!
Which is such a vital plot point that it is never brought up again during the remaining 4 episodes. Airing the day after Donald Trump's victory, the next episode's title is Oh Jeez. This was a line Garrison would utter from time to time, but never frequent enough that it could be considered a catchphrase. But during this season, Parker and Stone seem to have decided that it should be.
Oh, jeez! Oh, jeez!
Oh, jeez! Oh, jeez!
Oh, jeez! Oh, jeez!
Garrison has won the presidential election, but he seems to be behaving a tad robotic. And when Randy confronts him, his right-hand transgender Jenna throws up member berries into Stan's dad's face, putting him into a nostalgic trance. Eagle-eyed viewers will have noticed that at the start of the episode, Garrison's face also had traces of member berry vomit. Subtle! But that's all we see of Garrison in this episode, and in the next one, Members Only, he no longer seems to be in a trance and instead is very nostalgic for the days when Eric Cartman wasn't an enforcer of PC, and so has come for some revenge and power flaunting on South Park citizens. But Garrison must now attempt to behave presidential by sorting out the problem of Denmark, who are planning to make everyone's emails and browser history completely viewable to the public.
The Russians are asking what we intend to do about the Danish. Well, why are you asking me?
In the next episode, the town has Mr. Slave manipulate Mr. Garrison into bombing Denmark. But later, when Kyle finds out his dad is there as a prisoner for being an internet troll, he manipulates Garrison into cancelling the bomb order. With help from Cartman and Kyle, Garrison has the Danish device destroyed, thus completely restarting the World Wide Web. And so concludes Season 20. Kinda assumed the finale to this season would have wrapped up the Memberberry plot, considering how they'd taken control of Caitlyn Jenner, Randy Marsh, Garrison, and the White House. According to sources, Parker and Stone assumed Clinton would win, and so, combined with the fact most South Park episodes are created on the fly, the second half of the season required a speedy retooling.
Everyone sit down and shut the fuck up!
The character is the only person on the show to seemingly have an arc, while his fundamental personality did not change much during these 3 transformations. Garrison's bad-tempered, flamboyant behaviour has made him my favourite character in South Park, and I'm so glad that after 6 years of nada, he's finally been put to some use. This is Jeffrey Kitch saying, "Some of you are probably wondering why I chose to talk about a character from a series that is still in motion, meaning that this video will be outdated within a few months. You think I wanted to make this video? No. He made me do it." Yes. That's right. And he's been watching you this entire time. He's always been there for me. And you? Us. And now, ye shall bear witness to my true form. Get it? Because I couldn't think up anything better for the ending. Oh, jeez.
I'm alive. Where's Mr. Head?
I'm switching him with Mr. Twig. I've decided it's about time I changed my background layout a bit.
You go to hell! You go to hell and you die!
Oh yeah? Well, maybe it's time you had a timeout. A 6-month timeout.
Oh, all right, have your way with me if you must. Go on, fulfill your sick pleasure. Where are you going?